In this modern life, we're so cut off from nature. We're so cut off from how our bodies need to live. And you not being able to really let loose and go swim in a river, you really have to listen to that and say, that is not okay. That's not the life I want to live.
There's days there's like a frothy film on the top. And when you see that and the bubbles just like sat on the surface, that suggests something that's outside of what's natural.
Sewage pollution actually accounts for only 4% of what pollutes rivers.
So sewage in our rivers is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
When you work out what goes into the river and you find out and you do all these investigations and you discover all these things and you're like, oh my gosh, there's so much that's going on. And yeah, that's where you get to a point you're like, oof, can we even fix this?
In Bristol, there's quite a specific culture of protest, and that's what makes the film really fun, really Bristol. It's very creative, and people kind of reject the status quo and take things into their own hands. Rivers are the veins to the planet, like they're a really, really key part of the ecosystem, and protecting rivers better will protect the oceans better, will protect the forests better, you know, they're all connected.
You know, you look after the river looks after you. And for a myriad of reasons, for mental health, for physical health, for social space, you're taking, but you need to worry about what is this space, because if it wasn't there tomorrow, then what?
I live a nomadic lifestyle and I'm never in one place for too long. So from time to time, I find it very convenient to order groceries in the form of a Gusto box. I've been using Gusto for nearly 5 years now. It's a delivery company that sends you fresh food and all the ingredients you need to cook delicious meals at home, along with very easy to follow recipe cards. They have over 90 recipes every week, so there really is something for everyone. And so many of their recipes I've returned to again and again because their meals are just delicious. I've got a referral code. I've shared it with so many of my friends. It means they get cheap groceries on their first few boxes and I get credit in return. I'll link it below. Use it to sign up and you get a pretty hefty discount off your first box. There's no subscription required and you can order just one box whenever you want. I want to start with what I think is probably a quite fundamental question about this theme, and that is, in a UK river, should we, should I, should you, should anyone listening to this put their head under the water?
It depends on who you're asking. Because if you're asking me, I do. But I also, I assess the situation beforehand, because not only are rivers different, every river is different. Every river has its different sources and different places it flows through, but also the river changes every single day. And so for us who swim in the same spot every day, it also changes. So what you find in the morning is not necessarily what you find in the afternoon or in the evening, or the next day. And then also different times of year, it changes as well, because like now the river level is really low because it's summertime. And it's very slow moving, it's barely moving. So swimming upstream is super easy. Whereas in the winter, it's completely just high up, flooded sometimes, fast flowing. And with it brings lots of things, as you're swimming. So you have to be careful as well of debris. So there's loads of things to consider. I would say you have to assess, but again, it depends on who you're asking and where you're swimming and what time of day and what season. It's like so many variables. That's my answer.
Charlotte, what's your perspective?
Well, I got burned last time. I dipped my head under. I was so sick. And so I can't now. I just can't bring myself to. And it was really sad because it was actually the most joyful swim I've ever had. It was a beautiful sunny day and it was still quite cold. And I remember like dipping under and it feeling so cold around my head and just feeling so happy and floating and looking up. And I remember thinking like, this is the most joyful swim. And I was on my own and I was just feeling so kind of connected to, this river that's like near my house. So like lucky. and then just spent the next 2 days vomiting my guts out. And then I had a screening of my documentary film about sewage pollution in rivers to try and get better for. So at that screening, I was just still recovering. But that was actually a day where the swimming group, we, normally meet for a swim in the morning. And Aggie, you'd been there, other people had been there, and I think you hadn't gone in.
No, I remember that day very distinctly because it was one of those days which even I didn't put my head under. So I think it was just one of those that Charlotte got carried away and she was like, I really want to do this. I haven't done it in ages. And I've been doing it. And all these people we swim with usually do it. The swimming community that we swim with in the morning, they usually do it. I don't know, they probably did. Nothing phases them. But then I remember personally being like, today feels a bit iffy. And I didn't put my head under. But you went for it.
I went a bit later in the day.
Later in the day, yeah.
I think maybe there was something funky. And then I went a bit later. And like we hadn't, because I didn't message it, because normally like I'll message and be like, oh, is anyone going? But I just thought I'll go. And so I didn't message. So no one was able to say, oh, we didn't like go in or didn't go under. Oh my gosh. So yeah, I just can't bring myself to now, but I know people do. And it's like lovely and they're fine. But the memory, I just can't anymore.
I don't know. I feel like it's also a lack of the draw because I'm from Kenya, so I probably have a really tough tummy just from picking up whatever bugs. And so maybe that's something that's worked in my favor. But also, I feel like I've become really good at gauging what the water's like. And so there's days even I wouldn't do it, which should say something. Because
and when you say you're gauging what the water's like, what are you looking for? What are you noticing? So
there's like a frothy film on the top, and that looks a bit sewage-like. Without going into further details, I think that's just the first thing that you notice. And when you see that and the bubbles just like sat on the surface, that suggests something that's outside of what's natural. And that's where I'm like, I'm not comfortable. So it could be a smell. Sometimes it smells funny, but it looks fine. Or it could be the way it looks. And so usually for me, if it's chocolate brown, sometimes people talk about it being chocolate brown. Sometimes the chocolate brown color is the cleanest, in my opinion. Sometimes it's chocolate brown because of the soil or because of just rain and runoff without necessarily it being that it's polluted. Do you know what I mean? So sometimes it looks chocolate brown, but when you're in it, it feels fresh. But then there are days when it looks like it could be good, but then when you go in, it's a bit slimy and it's got that film and you've got bubbles and you're just like, something off. So I feel like I've kind of worked out how to gauge when to do it and when not to do it. And most of the time I do it and I really thoroughly enjoy it. There's a time I stopped actually when we started doing this documentary film and learning all this stuff about it. I think I got a bit put off and I stopped for a long time, like a year and a bit. I stopped swimming with my head under and it just became the norm. And then one day I just felt like, I could see people I was swimming with doing it and I just thought maybe I should just follow my gut. And then I went back to swimming and it's not been the same. It's like a very different experience, obviously. So I really enjoy it when I can. But there are days when I'll come to swim and I'll have a very different swim because I haven't put my head under for whatever reason.
Aggie swims the most, I think, out of every person I know. You and Frank, who's in the film, who speaks so beautifully about like his connection.
The bathing bells, they swim a lot.
Yeah, I think you swim the most though.
I try.
Yeah. So, well, the three of us, we went for a swim this morning.
Wasn't it glorious?
It was a beautiful day. So we're recording this in mid-June in the middle of a beautiful stretch of sunny weather.
It's probably the sunniest day, the hottest
really
day
warm.
today.
Yeah, one of the 30
degrees.
Probably one of the hottest days of the year, actually. Yeah. Getting out in the morning swim was lovely. In fact, it was so warm that getting out of the swim just didn't feel cold.
Yeah.
We're right next to the River Avon, just on the outskirts of the city of Bristol. A beautiful stretch of river, and actually from what I know of, the Avon is a very beautiful river anyway from where it flows around. We went for a swim in the spot that you featured in your documentary, and so I watched the film last night at a screening in Bristol, and it felt like I was doing a pilgrimage going to this beautiful spot, which has become, I suppose it's been taken over by the locals to be a spot that celebrates wild swimming, even though there are signs nearby that prohibit and warn against wild swimming. within the documentary, you saw someone who had made a bench, and there's now a post with some hooks on so you can hang your towels and clothes. It's just on the river path, and it's very unassuming. You wouldn't really know it was really there. If you kind of cycle past, you kind of wouldn't really see it unless you saw someone hanging their trunks on it. A beautiful spot of the river, and I thank you for taking me in. I haven't done much river swimming recently, and I myself have taken a step back from wild swimming in the last probably 5 years because there's been so much in the news, so much more awareness of what is going into our waters, not just in our riverways, but in the oceans as well. And I think I've arrived at a place where I 10 years ago, I went on a wild swimming journey and have swam down rivers and in lakes and, got the wetsuit and do that whole kind of way of swimming. But I've taken a step back from that. And then this year, maybe because the weather's been so good, I've been rediscovering that. So I feel like I've arrived at a really good time to have and share this experience with you. So we went for a swim this morning, and the first question I asked is, should I put my head underwater? And Aggie, last night you said it's up to you, it's personal, do it by feel. Charlotte, you said you don't. So I made the decision not to, even though I probably got a bit of water splashed on my mouth. So I did a little bit of breaststroke. We were in for about 20 minutes. A very peaceful way to experience the river because you get to see it. And you get to see the dragonflies flying by and the birds flying over and the people whizzing past on the towpath. But for me, there was an element of restriction in that form of swimming, in that I wasn't as free as I would have liked to have been because I was holding something back because of the dangers that this water faces, the unseen dangers that we can't really see and we don't know if it is there or not. So it's not necessarily a question, but that's just a reflection of my experience. And I wonder how, digesting that, you feel about that.
Well, I mean, I guess, again, it comes down to the luck of the draw because, when we were doing the citizen scientist water testing sampling, one of the things we learned, because obviously both of us were new to it and we started getting involved with this film, is that sometimes the water looks clear and looks great, but that's when it comes back with the most red flags from the test results. So that's why I say don't listen to me. I might be like, oh, I think it's great, but actually maybe that's the days at its worst. I don't know. Again, I think I'm lucky because I have a tough tummy. Maybe I don't know. Like who knows? There's people who swim with their head under every single day. Even the days when I'm like, I don't know if I'll put my head under. The bathing bells who swim in the mornings, they just dive straight in. They just go straight in. So they don't even gauge you. They just completely submerge. And that's how they have their swim. There's no other way that they can experience it. They go there for that. And I never hear them complaining about being ill or having had any experiences or whatever. So it's a very individual experience. Yeah, I mean, that's all I can say. Please don't do this at home. Just because, I'm saying I do it and I'm fine doesn't mean you'll be fine. If you're lucky to, then yeah, fine. But I enjoy, like you said, when you swim and you have no inhibitions and you let yourself go, it's a much better experience. Again, wildlife is a good indicator. So there's days when I come and there's no sign of wildlife, and that's a bit of a spooky thing. It's like, why aren't the birds here? Maybe there's something that they know that I should, And so I use that as a sign of if there's loads of wildlife and it's buzzing, and like, well, it must be that it's good and they're fishing and there's loads of wildlife and it's. So I don't know. Again, who's to say that what I'm saying makes sense? Maybe I'm speaking rubbish, but that's what I use to guide me.
Yeah, I think this whole situation, we're so in this modern life, we're so cut off from nature. And we're so cut off from how our bodies need to live, kind of exposed to nature and outdoors, the sounds and the feeling. And I think we're finally getting to a point where we're kind of really listening to ourselves and and feeling or listening to how being cut off is really affecting us. And this moment when you want to swim in a river and you want to really go for it and you can't because of all these reasons of pollution and it not being safe to swim, it's actually really important to just acknowledge how wrong that is and to demand and try to build a world where you can do that, because fundamentally we are so cut off from nature in England. And it's not just places to swim in nature. It's kind of, we have so little right of access, right of way to the countryside. We've only got uncontested rights of access to about 3% of riverbanks. And, quarries, reservoirs, lakes, you're not allowed to swim in them. Forests and woods and fields are all like, a lot of England is privately owned, the land. Like, we're just so cut off from it. And what that causes for us is that we are so like unhealthy in of ourselves. So it's not a small thing, that you wanted to be able to put your head under and you couldn't. It's actually emblematic of a really big problem. And that's why it's really important that we actually stop and try to figure out why. And we are, like, across the country, grassroots communities are saying, like, what is my local river or lake? And actually, I want to access it. And is it safe enough to access? And we're really trying to reconnect with nature. And that the grassroots movement to try and access blue spaces, like water for swimming, is like the key thing that is changing this movement, because people are demanding that connection.
Let's get into the heart of why we have this problem. Why are people hesitant, one, to get into the water, two, to put their head in? What is the state of what's happening in our rivers?
I mean, you could go as far back as to see that we unfortunately have an extractive relationship to nature, and nature doesn't have rights. We don't have a sense of connection to it in the way that is natural to us. So, and that's reflected in legislation. And so there's not enough legislation that means that we have to understand how healthy, particularly like the rivers, there's just not enough testing done to understand how healthy the rivers are. That's why citizen science has been transformative in this movement. The spot that's in the film, legally, the Environment Agency only has to test it once every 2 years. That's like taking your blood pressure once every 2 years and being like, you're fine. You had a heart attack a few days ago, but like right now you're fine. It doesn't make any sense. We don't understand how healthy or unhealthy our rivers are. And so the legislation is really important. But yeah, I think essentially your ordinary person would see a river as a reciprocal relationship. We take care of the river takes care of us. It's a living part of an ecosystem that we need. And so we have to consider it and keep it alive. But the way that companies behave, they don't seem to behave in that way. The way that kind of local councils and governments in general tend to behave, don't tend to view it in that way. So there's this real disconnect between how an ordinary person views a river and the people making decisions that actually affect this river. And thankfully, the movement of citizen science and people engaging and involving and trying to make decisions is changing now, and it's kind of grassroots up. But before, there's just not been the understanding as to how healthy the river, the legislation has been just too weak.
Okay. What's going in our rivers?
Hormones,
drugs, pharmaceuticals.
How's that happening?
Through sewage pollution. So there's also what ends up being dumped in the rivers from the water companies, the sewage pollution, is carrying stuff that you as a human has got rid of that is not good for you. And then it ends up in the water, and then it becomes part of this ecosystem. And then now you have the fish having to contend with that, and then the birds having to eat those fish, and then it just carries on and carries on. But then there's also like sometimes like there's a documentary. Another thing is we didn't know this film was part of a movement. So since coming out and going to different festivals and then finding other films that are very similar across the country, just because there's so much going on and everyone's trying to do something about it. And then there's a film we watched where they were talking about the kind of pollution where they had like, wasn't there like a pram or something that was thrown in the river? So some people use it as just a dumping ground to throw stuff, you know, car wheels and just all sorts of just rubbish. So there's a lot of things that end up in the rivers because, again, it comes down to the attitude of the people. And if people see it as a dumping ground, then that's what they'll use it for. And so when you say you swim in a river, some people think it's outrageous that you're swimming in a river because to them a river is a dumping ground or a rubbish bin. But then obviously that's not what it is. It's not supposed to be a place where you chuck your old pram or whatever. You know, it's supposed to be a place that's, like Charlotte said, it's part of an ecosystem. There's loads of animals and wildlife and nature that depends on this river. So yeah, I mean, there's loads of things that end up there that shouldn't be there.
Yeah. And interestingly, sewage pollution actually accounts for only 4% of what pollutes rivers. A lot of it is agricultural runoff, particularly from the kind of really big industrialized farms. But my understanding from hearing from people in the charity sector or the NGO sector trying to protect rivers, they just felt they couldn't go after farmers first because that's quite contentious. So they thought, okay, sewage pollution, it's quite, you know, it's this monopoly. There's a lot of kind of profits being made off it. And it's a really ridiculous situation. So we'll go after the sewage companies first. And with all the citizen science and the testing and the understanding, then there can be more understanding of the health of the rivers. And then we'll try and figure out how to deal with the issue of agricultural runoff. So just chicken shit and cow shit, and it's just on the field and there's not enough like the bushes and the barriers to protect it. It rains and then it just seeps off from the field into the river. And then the hormones and the chemicals that go into the animals as well. So it's a very, you know, it's a very complex situation, but the tide is turning and there is hope. And, you know, you've got one charity that's trying to campaign for, you know, Thames water to be taken into public ownership specifically. There's another group who's just trying to, you know, get rights of access to a particular river. There's another group who's, you know, trying to test the water more. All of this is really important because it is such a complex problem. But the connection, that's why we wanted to tell a story of love and connection, because the love and the connection and that hope is what is turning the tide, and ordinary people interacting, trying to protect, getting to know their river. That's what's turning the tide, because these problems will never end. They're just going to change and warp. But the more that people are like testing their local river, taking part in it and noticing their river, getting to know their river, that's what's changing things.
So sewage in our rivers is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't realise that was how smaller on scale it is towards the bigger picture. I didn't realise that was a thing. I thought that this was the big thing because, and quite, you know, human sewage, no one wants to be swimming in that, but actually a lot of it's also animal sewage.
Oh yeah.
I know there's a big problem in the River. Why? Because there's a huge campaign about the chicken industry there. That's been kind of well publicised recently. That makes me feel like this is a problem that's going to take decades to... I don't even think it could be solved, because you're always going to have some kind of natural runoff of things which no one wants. when you're talking about farming and industrialization of food?
Yeah, I mean, because population is rising and there's always going to be more people encroaching onto natural spaces, then it just goes that things will keep threatening the ecosystem, just because that's who we are as humans. We're destructive. And so obviously where we swim now, what it is now is not what it was 100 years ago, because there was a lot less people around, a lot less waste, a lot less pollution, a lot less pharmaceuticals, a lot less plastic, a lot less everything. But now we are where we are because we're so many of us, and we're just doing the most, and we're using a lot of things that are not good for the environment. So it is a difficult one to challenge, because we're only getting more and we're only growing in number. I think it would have to come down to not just legislation, but also lifestyle. Like, if governments banned plastic from ever being produced, for example, that would make a difference, But for as long as we have that as part of our day-to-day life, then it's something that we have to worry about how to get rid of it. And plastic doesn't decompose. So it's something which we're going to have to figure out, like, what's the answer? Maybe AI can answer that. I don't know. But like, in the meantime, we're still doing what we do, and we're still living, and people are still having babies and having disposable nappies, and then they end up somewhere. They have to go somewhere. And for as long as people, like governments, don't know what to do with that, then it becomes a problem that all of us have to figure out how to fix. And going back to your original question about why people choose not to put their head under, I think generally speaking, outside of what because like you said, it's just the tip of the iceberg when we're talking about sewage pollution. And people will hear about that and they'll be like, okay, I'm not going to touch that. Or they'll hear about stories of people getting ill and they'll be like, I'm not going to touch that. But the fact of the matter is, there's still a lot to learn. There's still a lot to be learned, to be known about the river, because most people will use the river different ways. So some people will paddleboard on it. Some people will walk, and we have loads of dog walkers. They love them. It's a really beautiful spot, as you saw. So there'll be the people who interact with the river, but not in the way that we do. And so they don't ever have to think about what it means to swim in the river, because it's just not something that they would consider. And as such, they wouldn't want to know more about the river, or how it is, the health of it, how it's cared for. None of that. So there's a huge percentage of the population that live in ignorance of the environment, because it doesn't affect them, if you know what I mean. But then the more we get to learn, and the thing about doing this film was that it was an eye-opener even for us, because you think that, oh yeah, sometimes you can get ill from swimming in the river. But when you work out what goes into the river, and you find out, and you do all these investigations, and you discover all these things, and you're like, oh my gosh, there's so much that's going on. And yeah, that's where you get to a point, you're like, oof, can we even fix this? But the fact is, which is what I've been singing from the very beginning, is the more, like, for me, I feel like I want films like ours to try and sensitize people about the environment, and to make them care about the environment, because the more they care about it, the more they'll look after it. And like Charlotte was saying, it's a give and take. You look after the river looks after you. And for a myriad of reasons, people use the river for whatever, for mental health, for physical health, for social space, whatever it is. You're taking, but you need to worry about what is this space, because if it wasn't there tomorrow, then what?
Just jumping in briefly to say, if you've got this far, you're probably a fan of the show. And it would be great if you wouldn't mind confirming that love by following or subscribing to this podcast. It takes just one click from you, but it really does make a huge difference in getting more people to find this show. Thank you. I might have sounded a little bit like there is no hope. But I think hope is coming in different forms, and this collective movement that we've seen in the last decade has certainly been a start to get people to be aware of what is going on. And if people aren't aware of what's going on, then they can't ask for change. And that's, I think, is the first step. And I think that's where we have come from in the last 10 years. Both of you have come together to create a film that champions local people who love the River Avon, their local river, and their stories of how they use it all individually, but also the bigger picture of the campaign of getting cleaner water. So let's dive in and talk a little bit about the documentary. First, if you wouldn't mind, Aggie, let's start with you. Talk a little bit about your background and and how you arrived to be one of the co-producers on this film.
So my background is actually fiction, scripted drama. I direct and have produced and edited in the past as well. So I like working with actors, which is a very different kind of ballgame. But then I worked with Charlotte on a short film that I made a couple of years ago, and she very willingly volunteered to help me put this project together, which was a passion project with no money. And so I was putting together a team, and she actually reached out to me when she saw me posting about, I was looking for a snake for the film. And then I was like, yeah, sure. And so we didn't really know what that partnership was going to look like. I just was happy to have people willing to be involved in this project. And then what ended up coming out of that was one of the most beautiful collaborations, because we worked really well together and we just hit it off really well. She lived in the area that I'd been trying to move to for the longest time, because I've been trying to move close to the river for quite a while since the pandemic. And so there was like so many things going for like our association. And so when we finished the film, it was great and we worked really well together. I wouldn't have done it without her. And then I had a full-time job at the time, which eventually I walked away from. And at the time I knew she was doing this film or just starting to do this film or looking into it and stuff. But then I wasn't really involved. And then when I left my job, she was like, can you please come and produce this film with me? Again, off of the back of the way we'd worked together and how well we knew we were going to make a good team. So I jumped in and also because by that point I was coming, even though I hadn't moved here yet, I was coming closer to where she lives to swim more and use the river more. And because of that, I'd created my own connection with the river, my own connection with the swimming community. So I ended up being a bit of an asset in that sense because I knew a lot more about swimming. And at that point, she was like, I'm only a summer swimmer. I don't swim in the winter. So I had a different experience to swimming in the river. So I felt like we both felt like there was more that I was bringing in terms of my connection to the river and what stories I could tell from that perspective. And then through us collaborating, working together, it was also about me helping to access the swimming community. And then, it just worked out really well because we got on really well and we were mostly like just speaking the same language and having really similar ideas and finding people and making it work. And it just morphed into what it became without us knowing where it was going. So a lot of it was luck. And
Charlotte, what's your background and why did you want to make a film about the local community's experience with the river?
Well, my work has been mainly working internationally with charities in kind of development or disaster response. And I kind of, I worked with Oxfam and would go to kind of areas of conflict or natural disaster to kind of report to donors or create films for fundraising. And, it was really, really incredible work. But a lot of kind of diving, getting into a place, capturing content really quickly due to like the security situation, or the need to like deliver report on that situation and coming back and editing and packaging it together and then sending it out. So meeting people for a day or half a day. And, it was really, really great, really important work. Like I remember one time I was filming in Mosul with Oxfam in Iraq and they said, okay, we'd filmed an interview with a woman about her setting up a business in Mosul as part of like her kind of recovery process. And they're like, okay, you've got 5 minutes to film at her market shop because of the security situation, because there's snipers around apparently. And so I'm like, okay, 5 minutes, slow motion then, and just meeting people, ensuring that they're kind of protected and informed and trying to identify a story really quickly. I developed a skill set that could really work to that. But then after a while, I really wanted to really get to know people and build relationship. And so being able to kind of stop and try to tell a longer story was something that I really wanted to do. And we also wanted to move near the river. I'm not from Bristol, and my husband took me kayaking along the river. I was like, what is this? What is this paradise? It was stunning. It fed to me. It called to me. It was amazing. So I said, we have to live next to this river. And, we were lucky. We also found a place next to the river. And then I heard a mermaid wanted a film to be made about her. So I followed this mermaid. She kind of...
This is Lindsay.
Lindsay, the mermaid.
Is kind of in the film.
Yeah.
But this is how the film started, because it actually started as a short film about her voyage to cross the Bristol Channel, right?
Yeah. Well, no,
I assume the length of the Avon.
She commissioned me to make a film about her swimming along the Avon, doing 60 kilometres and learning. It was over a week, chatting to citizen scientists, chatting to scientists, chatting to otter spotters and to kids who were learning how to test the river. And it just blew my mind. I was a fair weather swimmer at the time, and I was ashamed at how little I knew, because I knew not to put my head under generally, but I didn't know why. And this was before it was a lot in the news. So we're filming this film, and I was just like, I'm ashamed. This is my river that I love, and I didn't know how much we were destroying it. And so I followed Lindsay more after we made that film. And what's amazing about, the community around the river of swimmers and people who are campaigning to protect it is that it is a community, and I couldn't just follow Lindsay. There was just so much going on. And so I heard of this campaign about people testing the water. And then, had met Aggie and brought Aggie on, and Aggie, with her kind of directing, storytelling sensibility as a fiction director, Aggie came on and was like, you need to, I was following the campaign, because I've worked with lots of charities capturing campaigns and telling that. So I was like going around following the campaign, following the mermaid. And Aggie's like, yeah, but you need to film people who just love the river and just capture that love. And so then Aggie would kind of develop those relationships with people who just swam and were just there. And then it just became this tapestry of people. And we couldn't not bring in new people, because it is this unique spot where people gather, and it's so loved. It's so special. Bristol can be quite congested. It's quite busy. We really, in the scenes where we're in the city, we really turn up the kind of city sounds, because it can be quite, a busy city. But then you go down this valley and all of that melts away.
Yeah.
And it's just this special spot of river. And it is so special to the community that live around it. So it was really great to have Aggie on, because Aggie's just like, let's just find someone who just loves the river. And we did.
And it was interesting because, obviously in the summer, everyone's swimming because they're cooling off because it's hot. When you speak to winter swimmers, then you really get to understand why people need the river and what it means to them. Because there are people who, to the layman, they would be like, nuts. Why are you swimming at this time of year when it's freezing cold? It's miserable. What are you thinking? And when you find those people and you ask them, what does this mean to you? Why do you do it? Then you get to understand the river and its meaning to people in a whole nother way, because there's things we didn't know. I thought I was swimming, I'm an all year round swimmer, mainly because I like the nature. I like to swim. Sometimes I'll swim with my head above water on purpose, because I just want to take in the sights and the sounds and the birds flying around me, and just get lost in it and just immerse in it. And swimming in the winter, sometimes when you have the mist on the surface of the water, and it's really magical. It feels like you're swimming through a cloud. So there's things that I've gotten to experience swimming in the river that I really love and make sense to me as an individual who swims in the winter as well. But then you talk to other people, and then you find out people using it for their mental health, using it for their arthritis, for menopause, for like things which, I mean, I was like learning new names of new conditions that the river was the fix for. And I was like, wow, we need to have you in the film because then it kind of helps us showcase how important this piece of nature is to so many people. And that's where kind of like, I guess, I was seeking these people out and finding out what their story is. And surprisingly, a lot of people, most people, were very happy to open up about why they needed the river and what it is that it was doing for them.
Yeah, it's this very physical healing ground.
Yeah.
People come either for some solace or to just cure their like daily aches and pains in life, no matter what form that comes in. One of the guests, which was an emotional sucker punch I wasn't expecting, was Frank, which I won't kind of reveal because I don't want to give that away for the people who need to see it. He was such a fabulous addition to the story.
Yeah. I mean, how did we find Frank? I think we heard about him or something and it was just...
No, I saw him and chatted to him and swam with him and saw that he swam all the time, just...
Every single day.
Every
Sometimes
day that he
3
can.
times a day.
Yeah. On the weekends when he's got a day off, he'll go like sometimes 3 times a day. And so I'd just see him on the river all the time. And and he's just a poetic man. He speaks so beautifully about his connection to the river in the film. And he talks like that all the time. He's a poetic soul. You know, he just loves getting into deep conversations. He'll come and pass me like a poetry book. He'll like print out an article that he's read and you know, want to talk about the article. You know, he's such a great person and his connection is so intrinsic to his life and who he is. It's really special. And this film was quite a beautiful illustration of ecofeminism, which is a kind of protecting the environment from a position of love and the kind of the masculine approach to protect the environment, which is equally as important, is out of duty and honour. And the ecofeminist approach is out of love and connection. And I just love that in the film, the most beautiful and poetic articulation of that is from a man, because, you know, men are part of feminism and are part of ecofeminism. So this film isn't about a campaign, it's about love and it's about connection. And that's why, you know, in the film, we don't end with the campaign win or loss or information. We end with love, we end with a wedding. And we take time to, the kind of the narrative of a film is kind of swim campaign. It kind of, but we start with the love and we end with the love.
Yeah. I think the beauty of the film is seeing people's love for the natural world. And obviously the campaign is important to know that there's a story where people are trying to take control and trying to create positive change, whether or not that is achieved or not, because there were hurdles in what we saw in the story of the film. I wonder if you could talk to us about the status of what is happening specifically on this river, the River Avon, and any updates that have come since filming.
Yeah, so in the campaign that we follow is Conan Bathing, who are a group of citizen scientists who test the water, deliver the results to Wessex and try to report to the local community about the results. And then they do.
Well, what's important, and you show this in the film, is that it's not an easy process. They are having to go out of their way every day that they test to deliver these water samples because the testing is not done by water companies on a regular basis. That's correct, right?
And not if they do, there's no demand to report it. So they might test and not report it, or they don't test.
Okay.
So Conan Bathing test the water and report it to local community. And also they were asking the local council to remove a bylaw that prohibited swimming because they wanted to make it a designated bathing water site, which means the Environment Agency takes on that responsibility to test and investigate incidents of sewage pollution. because currently the Environment Agency only has to test that patch of river once every 2 years. Whereas if it's a designated bathing site, then they have to test it every week during the swimming season. Now,
so just to pause you there first, it's not a designated swimming site because no one wants to take responsibility of people's safety. Is that correct? Or in the river? Because that as soon as they allow swimming, then there becomes, well, if someone becomes in danger, if someone dies, which unfortunately we hear stories about every year, then someone has to take responsibility for that if they have allowed that. Is that correct?
Well, that's not been stated by the council. It could be one of their reasons that they didn't respond to because there was a petition and they've not removed the bylaw. And so the petition wasn't successful. And so now Conan Bathing with Surfers Against Sewage are testing throughout the whole year, which is really important because designated bathing status, it's just a mechanism to try to ensure that the river is tested more, is understood more. You know, the health of the river is understood more. You know, we're not just saying we want this river to be protected so that we can swim. We want the river to be protected. So now instead of going for this bylaw, we're just testing the river with Surfers Against Sewage. And since the film, we joined Conan Bathing to test the water as part, in the film because we thought it was so important. And then a year and a half later, since the film's been out, the volunteers have gone from 5 to 50 people. So it's really made a difference. It's really helped people to understand that they can play a really important role in testing and campaigning. And maybe a particular petition wasn't successful, but actually what is successful is that hope and that belief that people can make a difference. So it's been really great for that. And now as a campaign, we're actually looking for personhood status for the river, so that the river has a human representative in council meetings. That's kind of one of the parts of if a river has rights and has status, then you've got someone speaking on their behalf when decisions are made around it.
Does that mean that someone will be designated to represent the river in any meeting where the river is in, and that could be any of the volunteers who want to step up to do that?
I mean, there's loads of river charities as well. So it's just finding that platform for those people to speak, to represent the river. At the moment, there isn't a platform for them. Okay.
Well, this is interesting because, Charlotte, I know you last week have been to Colombia and you took the film over there and you've screened it to some people out there. You spoke about talking with some of the indigenous people there and their experiences that they have with the natural world. So, and at the end of your film, we do see someone get married to the river, which might sound a little bit odd to many people listening and in the UK being like, what, never hear of something like that. But you tell me that some of the indigenous people are saying, well, that's what we do. We give the river a humanized voice. It's part of our culture and our world.
Yeah, it was really amazing to take the film to Colombia and screen it in the Andean mountains near this gorgeous, clean, rushing river, the Quindío River. And people in the audience, there were a lot of people who were indigenous, from Colombia, from Mexico, from Brazil. And they're just like, well, yeah, of course a river is alive. Of course it's a being, it's an entity that we can connect with in a spiritual way, in just a natural way. And of course it needs to have rights and protections. And the nature rights movement is being led by the indigenous community around the world. And the first river to be designated personhood is the Wanganui River in New Zealand. And that was led by the Maori people who, consider themselves guardians of the river, but now are designated guardians. And this river rights movement is being led by indigenous people who have never lost that way of thinking. It's just that other ways of thinking, were forced on the areas that they lived, and they weren't able to make decisions they would have to be guardians of the river. So it was really great. And, a lot of people said to me that the marriage to the river was their favourite part, was the most beautiful part, because it reflected that view of the river that they believed in and was very natural to them. And I think, that's why stories like this, I think in England, we've lost a lot of the ceremonies and the stories that would help us to connect with rivers. And, indigenous communities, you have ceremonies, you have stories, and we've lost them. So in a way, people are in England trying to make new old ceremonies, new versions of old ceremonies, or just new ones, or trying to find old ones as a way to help us to come out of our funny way of thinking, where we see a river as a resource, and come back into a completely different way of thinking. And that different way of thinking is what's needed to completely transform how we are interacting with the environment around us and how decisions are being made that affect the environment.
You mentioned the problem of getting rid of this bylaw that prohibits swimming. The reason why that bylaw exists is because the river water quality is not safe enough for swimming. You mentioned this in your film, so it's almost like this vicious circle of
I don't know about that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think maybe that's one person's stand. Maybe that's what one person would say. But from what we understand, at least let me speak for myself, is that the reason that bylaw exists is because they consider this stretch of river that we swim in as part of the harbour, even though it's miles and miles and miles away from the harbour. And so for them, it's more about just keeping things as they are, because it's easier for them to not have to think about a spot that's all the way over there. And so for whatever reason, whoever put it as part of the harbour made life easier for the legislators, because it's if we just prohibit swimming there, then that's the end of that. But actually, when you go there, you find that it's so far removed from the city centre, from the harbour side, from, you might have boats crossing that stretch, but you have more people, you have more wildlife, you have more otters than you have boats. At the end of the day, if you were to leave a GoPro and do a time lapse for a whole day, you'll see it's a conveyor belt of people using it. Then you have boats coming and going. And so I feel like it was just a lazy decision, because it means they don't have to think about it. If you want to use the argument of safety, it's neither here nor there, just because safety from who? How many boats are we talking about? It's not that many, and if it's a matter of announcing, oh, there's a boat coming, it'll probably happen twice a day or something. So that's my stand. I feel like it was just a really easy way out of making decisions.
You're so right. If we're going to deep dive into bureaucracy, it's a recent bylaw, and the minutes of the meeting where the bylaw was created aren't publicly available. People from our community have tried to find them and they're not. So it's just, it's emblematic of the bureaucracy and, laws that aren't fit for purpose to protect rivers and to help and to allow us to access the rivers, which generally people feel that they should have a right to swim in a river. And obviously there's a lot of safety considerations around that. Safety is really important, but generally people do believe that they should be able to access a river if they want to safely. So all of the details that we've had to wade through as a community around this, it's just emblematic that it's not fit for purpose, because people do swim and there is a swimming community there. And even since the film, since that petition was rejected, the council said, would you like to run a swimming program where people can book in and you pay for a slot and you have lifeguards and all things like this? And the swimming community just said, no, that's not the culture of swimming around this spot, And also a lot of people can't afford to to book in and don't want to book in this slot and things like this. So
it makes it very exclusive because it becomes
Yeah.
about a specific time that you can do it and then having a specific amount of money, and it just cuts off a lot of people. Whereas you want to be able to go swimming in the night if you want to. You know, that's the beauty of swimming in the river. I'm a member of an exclusive club, which is quite contentious. I wouldn't mention them, but then one of the things that people don't like about this swimming club, it's an old quarry that's been turned into a lake, but it's very exclusive. And the reason people feel a bit salty about it is the fact that it's so many people don't have access to it, even though it's a gorgeous spot. But even for those of us who have access to it, it's very limiting, and you have to only go on the times that they're operating, and then you have to pay a certain fee, and then all these caveats. And yet we used to live quite close to that particular lake. And when I discovered the river, I was crossing town to come to the river because I had that access whenever I wanted to for nothing. So to take that away from people is just it's criminal. Why would you do that?
I mean, a lot of people think the phrase wild swimming is not necessarily the best way to describe it. But if we just take the fact that it is wild swimming because it is being wild in nature, and it's not going to somewhere where there's a strict regime of booking in, going to a swimming pool or something and having certain hours. You can just swim whenever you want. That is the beauty of wild swimming. And I put that in little asterisks, in little quote marks.
But the other thing to remember, sorry to cut you off,
go for it.
Is if that was their concern in terms of safety, all you have to do is just put up signs saying swim at your own risk. That's it. That alleviates the responsibility from them, because even if you're swimming in a swimming pool, you go in knowing you can swim or you can't. So it wouldn't be necessarily because you've built a swimming pool for people to swim, everyone that gets injured in the pool because of lack of knowledge to swim or because they're swimming drunk or whatever is now your responsibility. At the end of the day, people have to exercise their own caution because everyone's kind of hopefully sound if they decide to venture into the river. And so even if they made it a swimming spot, doesn't mean now whatever happens in the river is their responsibility, because some people get drunk and they jump in the river. You can't take responsibility for that. That's crazy. And we wouldn't expect them to take responsibility for that. So it's more about how do you make it so that they're allowed to swim there. And as a result, you as the government are responsible for making sure that it's as safe as it can be in terms of pollution, in terms of, things that are thrown in that are debris that are not supposed to be there and blah, blah, blah. But in terms of what people do is out of your hands. That people are going to do the most because that's just what people do.
Why is it not as simple as just putting signs that say swim at your own risk?
Because it's lazy. That's what I'm saying. That it's easier for them to not bother with it. That's what I think. I think it's easier for them to just not bother with it, not think about it, not have to be dragged into conversations about it. It's just let's just keep things status quo and carry on focusing on, building roads or whatever.
Right.
That's what I think. I mean, again, don't quote me, but that's my answer. What's yours?
Well, I think, in Bristol, there's quite a specific culture of protest. And that's what makes the film really fun, really Bristol, is that it's very kind of creative, whimsical, and people kind of reject the status quo and take things into their own hands. When the Colston statue was thrown into the harbour, that was after decades of the community in Bristol saying, we want this statue taken down. And the process was slow. It didn't work out. And then during the spark of the Black Lives Matters movement, people were just you know what, we're going to do this ourselves. That's just quite Bristol. So the fact that there's a sign that says no swimming and people just swim anyway, and the council don't do much to kind of enforce it, I think that's just quite emblematic that people just say, we should swim here, we will swim here. It is a real shame for people who aren't fully able-bodied, because there are restrictions. The access should be better. And that's what I think is missing there, in that the council should make it easier for people to get into the river. Because you kind of climb down today and you had to like navigate. But it'd be nice if there was a bit of a safer access. Although
that's one of the biggest risks of while swimming is can you get in and out easily? Because anyone can get into a body of water, but it's the getting out which sometimes puts people in danger. And that's always something that's recommended to consider, is make sure you've got a good place to get in and out. And if you're swimming on the river or tide, make sure that there's other places that you might be able to get out if you get swept away.
Yeah.
One thing I was just saying to Charlotte, I regret about this morning swimming with you was I meant to show you the steps that since the film's been made, Chris has built some steps. So they were farther up from where we swam, not very far, maybe like 50 meters or something. And it's like the most beautiful steps you can ever imagine. And it started off with a sort of campaign that I set off, where I was trying to get people to come together and raise some money to build steps. And then it kind of went awry for one reason or another. And then Chris, our guardian angel, who's built all this beautiful stuff for us, saw how much it was taking its toll on me and how stressed I was about it because things weren't going the way I was hoping. And he stepped in and he's just like built these gorgeous steps. So in the end, it was a collaborative process, but it wasn't meant to be a collaborative, but it's one of those examples of how the community can come together to create a safe passageway for people to enjoy the river. And Chris is not someone who swims. He's in his 80s. He thinks we're nuts that we do it, but he wants to look after us and he wants us to do it well. And in fact, he just sent me a text saying, "Oh, I counted 9 people in the river this morning, but I didn't spot you." Like, he's always just like looking out for people that he recognizes, and he thinks it's just lovely that people use the river. So yeah, it's a shame you didn't get to see them, because that's one of the examples of how people can come together and create something that everyone can enjoy and be part of, something so magical.
Okay, let's go back to the story of your film. And in your campaign, you did actually get someone from Wessex Water to be on camera and speak and give their perspective and their point of view. And they said that it's not in their remit to provide clean water for humans to swim in. It was in their remit to provide ecologically clean water, but not for humans.
I mean, that just doesn't make any sense.
Also, that's not true. Because it's not ecologically safe even for wildlife. So
I know.
So they're failing.
I guess the thing is, it's true and it's not true. It's spin and it's ridiculous, but also maybe it's true. Listen, if the legislation isn't there, or the legislation is there and it's not enforced, then actually maybe there isn't a remit. You know, there's a moral remit. There's a social contract that we all feel that we're part of. But if they can get away with it, they will. And they are pretty confident that they get away with these things. And I was so surprised that this person in Wessex Water was willing to be on camera and just said everything that they said. And at the end, I got their permission on camera. And I just think that shows how confident they are, but that also they can get away with it.
Because that's another example of laziness. It's a bit of a loophole that they found of like, oh, if we just say these words, these like catchy phrases of it has to be safe for the ecological. It's like, first of all, which fish is going to come and tell you, my home is great, you've done a great job? Which bird is going to come and talk to you? They're like representing something which doesn't have any words to speak for itself, to advocate for itself, and then they're deciding we've made it good enough for them. Isn't that ridiculous?
Yeah, if it's not safe for a human to ingest, it can't be safe for a duck to ingest, or
dogs.
Or dogs.
Yeah.
And you feature that in your film. Dogs are river users just as much as humans, and sometimes even more. Yeah. And many people are walking their dogs and who love to go for a swim.
Yeah. We're always swimming in the water with the dogs jumping in. Yeah.
And dogs are getting sick.
Yeah. So it's spin, and they're so confident that they can say what they want. I mean, it was so interesting because when we put out statements as Conan Bathing, the response was always from Wessex Water. There is naturally occurring bacteria in the water. Great spin. There's not naturally occurring human feces, in the water to the levels that are coming up in our results, but great spin. And then it's in the past year, the spin changed to there's naturally occurring bacteria, and it's up to the council to ensure the safety of the river, or something passing the blame to the council. So I think what surprises me is just how much they know that they don't actually have to provide valid responses because they can get away with it so much. There's just not the legislation, and there's not the enforcement of the legislation to really stop what they're doing.
And they're a monopoly.
Yeah.
You can't switch water companies to one that has more ecological values. You're stuck in your area with one water company to treat your waste.
I actually feel sorry for that Wessex guy, because now he's the face of the enemy. Unfortunately for him. I mean, obviously they picked the most eloquent, well-spoken PR person who they thought was going to go and fix the problem. Now he's the person who everyone thinks is like representative of what is wrong with our rivers.
Mm-hmm.
But also it's almost like he doesn't even have the information. He doesn't know. He's just doing his job, and he's doing it to the best of his ability. And now, I think with them coming out with so much bravado, they must have done this so many times where they've just sent someone off to shut them up, and it's worked. They just didn't know who they were taking on this time around. And now it's ended up making them look so much worse. And especially like for him to be saying those words on camera, it's on record.
Yeah.
It's just really done them damage. Like they just look so bad. So
Side note, have you clipped that bit interview, put it out on your socials at all?
No, because the thing is, I don't think it'll do anything. I think that what is changing this situation is the grassroots movement, citizen science, people reconnecting with nature. That's the long-term change. So yeah, we could put one clip out, do a little gotcha thing, they'll spin it. You know, I don't think that will change anything. I think what will change things is more people thinking, is there a river near me, or is there a body of water? Can I find a way to access it? Can I find a way to understand whether it's healthy or not? Can I connect with other people around that? And can I spend some time with it myself? I sincerely think that is what is transforming this. So I almost can't be bothered to dedicate the time to like clipping that together and putting it out on socials.
Well, what do you hope water companies would do in an ideal world? What changes do you want to see them make across the next few decades?
I don't expect anything of the water companies. I want the laws to change, and I want the investment in investigating and following up the laws to change. Because I think companies, if they want to destroy the environment and destroy people's lives for profit, they will. So I don't expect anything of them, but I do demand better legislation, and I demand better enforcement of that legislation.
But if laws change, they will have to change.
Yeah, but it's not up to them.
No.
They change because they have to. I don't expect companies to do right by people and the planet. So I'm not going to leave it up to them.
yeah,
they just want to make money.
Yeah, which is a big thing with water companies. We're now more educated on what's happening to their profits. It's being redistributed to shareholders. This has been a practice that's going on for decades. Seems like just a really good money-making scheme if you're a shareholder in a water company. But it doesn't seem like that should be what the profits of water companies should be doing when they are just polluting the world that which we live in and not actually doing the job that they say that they are doing.
Yeah, but do you know the thing is though, Wales, the sewage companies are publicly owned there, and there's the same levels of pollution. You know, it's just the foundation needs to change. It's about seeing rivers as like ecosystems that need to be cared for and protected in and of themselves. And it's not reflected in the legislation of England, of Wales. So that's what needs to change, and the investment in actually putting that into practice. So you can have a country where it's a monopoly in England, in Wales. You know, perhaps when I took the film to screen in Wales, you know, campaigners there did say, oh, well, it's easier for us because when we want to make a complaint, we don't have to go through layers of spin. We can just actually speak to a civil servant. Whereas I guess in England, they'll spend more money on spin and PR and greenwashing before they'll actually try to solve the problem. But the rivers in Wales are still being polluted. So it's something needs to shift fundamentally. And that's where the river rights movement is really key to this, is designating rights to a river in and of itself. So that's my hope.
Mm-hmm. How do we all join this campaign? How do we get involved if we don't know, if we're not fully connected to our river like you two are in your local community, but we still feel that this is not right? What do we do as individuals?
Well, there's the Thriving Charter. There's the Column Bathing. So you can always get in touch with them and see how you can get involved. And every little counts. So it's one thing to be going out and marrying rivers or crossing channels on a mermaid tail or whatever, gets at the attention. But there's also what you can do from the comfort of your home in terms of helping with creating more of a voice whenever there's petitions, helping to sign them. Just in any small way, it'll make a huge difference. And it's things like these citizen scientists growing in number and getting more volunteers. Suddenly, we've galvanized, without knowing it, we've inadvertently galvanized people to get involved that would never have done before this film was made. So, there's going to be ways you can get involved. You just have to think of what you can offer.
Yeah, because not everyone, lives near a river or a lake or a quarry. If you do, it's interesting to think, do I actually live near a river? Because maybe a lot of people don't know. It might be a stream or a brook, but it's still part of an ecosystem. So you can look for it, spend time next to it, and engage with it, find a way to access it and see if anything's going on, see if you can test the water. So I'm sure there's lots of people in the UK who live near a water body but don't know it. So I guess maybe exploring and seeing is a first step. And then if you don't, then I think supporting charities and petitions for people that do is really important, because rivers are the veins to the planet. They're a really, really key part of the ecosystem, and protecting rivers better will protect the oceans better, will protect the forests better. They're all connected.
I met someone who came to the screening last night, and she was like, I don't know what to do. I feel like I want to do something. I want to do something to help. What can I do to help? And the more we spoke, she was like, oh, maybe I can do the testing because I live so close to the river and blah, blah, blah. Which is good because, you get this fire in their belly. It's like, okay, great. We've ignited that fire. That's good. But the more we spoke, the more she started to think, and she got her mind jogging. She was like, actually, I know the person who's connected to the legislation of this or that or the other, or I know the director of this. I should reach out to them and tell them about this film. And you never know, even just talking to people who might be well placed could be the answer that leads to some change. So I think it's just about getting your mind thinking, how can you get involved? And you think about someone like Chris, who's in his 80s and he doesn't swim in the river at all. But then he's massively changed how we all enjoy that space. And he's a huge impact to the community. He's a huge impact to the whole river in general, just because of how he just came and spotted people swimming. He thought that was crazy and walked past. And then he came and saw them again and saw them again and he saw them again. And then he was like, wow, it's a bit crazy how they have to hang their clothes on tree branches. And he did something about it. And he used his skill and his knowledge to build stuff. And he built stuff to make it a more comfortable space, put hooks for us to use, and created steps for us to access the water. That's something that is a huge contribution from somebody who doesn't even use the river. So everybody can have something to offer that you don't even know until you think about it,
Yeah. So you spent the last few years on creating this amazing piece of work, which is kind of one form of the journey. The second part of the journey is now getting to share that with so many people on individual screenings, touring around the UK. What's that experience been like?
So yesterday was our 70th screening, which was amazing. I didn't realize, and it's been really wonderful. It's an indie film, you know, self-made, filmed over a year and a half, in Bristol, and then we submitted it based on a rough cut to Kendal Mountain Festival and had to finish it. So that was good to have to finish it in time for that. And then we brought it to Bristol and did a big screening in a warehouse with 300 people, had a DJ night. It was really amazing. And then since then have filmed it in cinemas with Picture House as part of their green screen series, in universities, village halls, in so many places, and in festivals in France and in Colombia. So it's been really great, and a lot of communities have used it to either start to try to bring people in on a campaign or to celebrate a campaign that they've been running. So the Rivers Trust have organised screenings, Surfers Against Sewage. It's been really amazing, and I think especially going on tour with the film and speaking to people, I see just a sense of relief in people's eyes at screenings where they're just happy to celebrate love and connection, because this situation is so frustrating, so devastating. We rightly feel angry, and it's really nice. I think people say it's really nice just to spend time celebrating love and connection. And I think that's why the film is doing well, because people really need to be fed in that way. And that's what's sustainable as well, is to celebrate love, is the eco-feminist way to celebrate love, and to spend that time connecting with the nature that we're trying to protect, because that is what will help us, you know, keep going. Because we're never going to win, you know, there's just going to be issue after issue, which is why the bureaucracy is almost unimportant to me. But we just do need to keep going, keep hoping. And so that's why love and creativity is so important. And also just the Bristol way, just being really whimsical about it.
Well, I think also, as much as we've had a lot of success with the screenings, with the films, cinemas that have taken us on, it kind of I feel a bit begrudged that we haven't had yet, hopefully, you know, soon it'll change, but we haven't yet had a cinema that's taken us on for a solid run, and had them like put us on their website as part of their like screening timetable and market it and all of that. We haven't had any of that. And it's kind of a shame, because I think that's what it is when you're indie filmmaking. You do a lot of the heavy lifting yourself, but we've had such a great track record. We've sold out every single screening we've had in Bristol, and we've had loads, and there's still no one who's believed in us enough to be like, let's take your film on. And, you know, for such we talk about how we campaign in a Bristolian way, and we're very vocal about, you know, challenging the status quo. You'd think this would be the perfect like breeding ground to have a cinema that takes you on. And, you know, there's the cinemas that are really good at championing indie films, like to be championing a Bristol like filmmaker with a story that's connected with so many people, and to like something that you know, you could just elevate it and take it so much further. We haven't had that success yet. I'm not sure when or how, but hopefully that changes. The other thing is, like, people have asked us, why aren't you putting this on a streamer? Why aren't you just getting Netflix to pick it up or whatever? Like, it's good enough. We know it's good enough. The trouble is, there's something about having people converge to watch a film and then interact and gush about it after and find a connection and figure out how to, you know, even that, the Q&A sessions after, and people coming up to you and saying, I want to get involved. That's not something you're going to get with streamers. People will watch it and move on to the next thing. Whereas here, it's like, there's something about coming together and watching something so magical, getting affected and feeling like you have to get involved and just sharing in that space, which we would love to eke out as long as we can, if possible. So we'll see what happens, but that's just it's been a really nice experience to have that. And we wish we would have it on a larger scale. If that's
a film about community deserves to be shown within community so that people can come together. And that's it, you know, individuals aren't going to create the change unless they kind of all come together and work out how to be a bigger form of that entity. So yeah, well done for sticking and creating these spaces to have conversations. And I witnessed that last night and really enjoyed speaking to people who all have the different stories. I met Meg, who obviously is in the film as well. I was talking to her. She'd just been on a pilgrimage where she'd walked, I think was it the Avon she'd walked?
Mm-hmm. From Malmesbury to Chippenham.
Right, it was 2-year anniversary of her wedding with the river. And speaking with her, she echoed how little access she actually had to the river and how much trespassing she had to do, which is quite remarkable because you just feel like you do have this connection to a river. But like you said, if it's only just a very small percentage, there must be huge stretches of river where you just get this beautiful sense of solace, but there's
no access.
We're not allowed to go there because someone privately owns it.
I think that's a really good point, actually. What's really important with the fight to protect rivers is, how can we protect something that we don't love? And how can we love something that we don't know? And how can we know something that we can't have access to? So that's why people kind of wanting to find out what is there a local river, and can they access it, and can they try it? And this is why, for me, seeing the film in the cinema, being surrounded and getting that sense of what it's like to swim, the film, I wanted it to be so immersive and experiential to give the people that feeling of what it's like to really like swim in a river. And so, that's why I really wanted people to come see it in the cinema as well, because, I'm not sure if you can really just get that if you're watching it like on your laptop with some laptop speakers.
Well, we've touched on how this is not just an issue facing the River Avon. This is a national issue. In fact, even a global issue. But let's not go too far with our scope. I think trying to change things in the UK is the first order. Rave for the Avon is such an amazing brand. It's such a great start. This is just the beginning of a bigger movement. What do you hope this brand that you've built will evolve in the next kind of few years?
I keep saying this over and over. I want to have an impact on people in the sense of, because of how beautifully the film is made, and Charlotte and David did an amazing job with getting the best angles you can imagine. I would like it to not just galvanize people to do something about it, but also to invite people to use nature. And it's like Charlotte very beautifully put it just now. You can't protect something you don't love, and you can't love something you don't know, and you can't know something you can't access. And it's almost like working backwards of, first of all, getting people to go out and seek these rivers out and find them, and then fall in love with them, and then care about them, and then fight for them. And it's kind of like if we all had that ethos of doing things, then everything would be so much better, because we would be doing the most to protect things that we loved and people that we loved, and whatever beliefs that we had, and we would make life and the world a better place. So I think it's more that just like galvanizing people to seek out these spaces because it's there for them, and for you to use them because they really do help you live a better life. My life has massively improved since I moved closer to the river, since I started accessing it and using it for my day-to-day swims and just going there. Sometimes even just going for a walk with my husband. Suddenly it's like you have this weight lifted because you're immersed in nature and you're just listening to the birds and you're taking in the sights and the scenes and the smells, and it's just a whole nother way of life, which most people are missing out on. And it's like, why don't we do it? It's just there. It's there for you. It's there for us. Use it. In terms of a movement, I would like if it was possible for everybody to do something about something that they care about, and then create a movement where you're galvanizing people to get involved or find ways to live better lives. Then let's do it. Let's all do something about something that we care about. If you want to shout about, I don't know, whatever it is, yoga, figure out how you can connect with people to do yoga. I don't know. It's just, it doesn't have to be just a movement in terms of rivers specifically, or waterways specifically. It can just be about anything that you discover that you think is good for people to share in, then shout about it. In that sense, it's like a global movement to improve life in general.
Yeah, and my hope would, in the Q&As, we do get this question every Q&A, like, what would be your one thing that you'd like people to go away with? And I think it's having the confidence to talk about love for nature, because I think that that's part of the foundational transformation that will affect change in the long term. So yeah, it probably seems to some people like quite a woo-woo answer, or an answer that isn't kind of tangible, but I believe that that's at the foundation of it. So yeah, talk about love of rivers, love of nature. I think it's really important.
And do you think you're going to continue following these stories, profiling rivers and trying to create change nationwide? Yeah.
And I'd love to, because the style of filmmaking is cinematic, intimate, observational, fun, energetic, and focusing on the personality of people and giving time for that connection. So I'd love to tell that in different countries and different contexts. So that's what we're developing. And the trip to Colombia and meeting indigenous river guardians there was really great. So we're going to start pursuing stories like that.
Amazing. That sounds exciting. It's lovely that you're not just kind of doing this just for like a one-off project. This is like a continued kind of almost like life ambition to create this positive change. So I know both of you have your special relationship with the Avon, and that comes across in our conversation, but obviously in the people that you've captured along in the film as well. So thank you for profiling such an incredible story and getting so many people on board and all the different characters, and highlighting an issue which is everyone really, really deeply cares about. But it's like you say, if we're not educated on it, we don't know what we can do to change. And I'm thankful that you're part of that process that's creating this positive change going forward.
But it's also not knowing what impact it will have on you. Like, I never thought, if you asked me 10 years ago, that this would be something that would matter to me so much. I come from Kenya, which our rivers are a whole nother story. I would never have imagined swimming in a river would be such a huge part of my life. And also cold water swimming was not something which even when I first moved to the UK, swimming even in the summer, in the height of summer, I thought was a hoax. I went swimming in September and I just thought, this is crazy. I felt like my brain was shutting down because of how cold it was, because my body was used to much water, more tropical kind of settings. And so I just thought it was nuts that people were doing it. And I just thought, this is not for me. This is the end of my swimming career. I'm going to have to move on to something else to exercise or get out and stuff. But it was in, getting out more and interacting with people who did it more and understanding what it means to people, and then trying to figure out what that would mean to me, and just exploring it to try and find, it's like finding a drug, for example. I don't want to use drugs necessarily as an example, but it's like seeing someone getting so much joy out of something and thinking, well, I want some of that. It doesn't look like it's fun, but I'd like some of that. Let me try and see if I can have some of that. And so I decided to, seek these spaces out and finding myself properly just getting lost in it and properly enjoying them. And then thinking, this is what I need in my life. It's not something which I thought I was going to need until I found it, and then realizing I need to have it in my day-to-day life. And so eventually us being like, we should just move there, and eventually moving to be close to the river, and now it being such a huge impact in my life. And so you might be someone who might watch this or listen to this or watch the film and think, yeah, those guys live another life on a different planet. But until you look into it and then explore it, you don't know how much of an impact it might have to you. Like, it might just be the answer to what you're looking to fix. If it's, like all the reasons that people use the river for, it could just be a good escape. It could be a place to, go and fix your health issues. You just never know. So I would encourage people to just seek them out and see what it would mean to them.
Okay. Well, to close things, Charlotte, I wonder if you mind telling us about your perspective on what the River Avon has meant to you over the years.
Yeah, the River Avon. It's been amazing to get to know it and to get to know myself more. I think going for a swim on my own, I love the community around it, but going for a swim on my own, that's really, really wonderful. I didn't think I'd have the confidence to do something like that. But
I have that as well. There are days when obviously I seek out the community and I try and say I'm going for a swim, because there's quite a few WhatsApp groups and you can always be like, I'm going for a swim and someone will join you. But there are days I will deliberately not tell anybody and I'll just be swimming on my own and I'll try and find a quiet time because it's nice to just get lost. That's why I was saying sometimes I will deliberately swim with my head above water just so I can just get lost in it. And there's a way, like, especially in the winter, I'll lie on my back and I'll just completely, like, the sounds are shut off. I can't hear anything. I can just see like birds above me and, you know, and it's just, I get lost. It's like meditation. And I can't do that if someone's swimming alongside me chatting away. So that days I'm like, I just want to have just me time with the river, just us. So it's really magical.
Yeah. Yeah, I think seeing myself as part of the river expands myself, and that's something that I'm just starting to explore, and I think that's really interesting and really freeing, and trying to understand what is an alive river. I think these questions only expand our own understanding of who we are. So it's a really joyful journey. The River Avon has brought joy into my life, a lot more joy, and that's been really special.
Okay, I think that's a great place to end things. Thank you very much for your time. Really, really appreciated it.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much for tuning in. If you want to find out more information about any of the guests, please check out the show notes, where you'll also find links to things mentioned in the conversation. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please take a look through the past recordings. There's so many more incredible stories for you to find, and I can't wait for you to enjoy them. Thank you.